We're back on day 5 of this 7-day challenge to explain exactly which conditions have a firm link in literature to low stomach acid. Let's just start with the list. These are just some of the conditions that are linked to low levels of stomach acid or upper gastric malfunction. As you can see, the list is quite long. Autoimmune conditions make up roughly half of this list. This is no coincidence, and it really sort of galvanizes some of the information that we cover in the gut primer course about how leaky gut is basically considered a precondition for the development of autoimmunity to begin with, and that close relationship between leaky gut and low stomach acid. So, if you suffer from autoimmunity but don't see your condition explicitly listed here, just because there's an absence of a specific study on your condition doesn't mean that the same principles wouldn't apply to you, right? So these principles are universal. Honestly, there is more and more research about hypochlorhydria coming out all the time. So I suggest you simply Google the words hypochlorhydria with whatever condition or symptom you're dealing with and just see what pops up. Not the most exacting way to examine a relationship, but hopefully it'll just serve to illustrate that this is an incredibly hot topic these days. What's not so hot, though, are the lack of safe, available methods to address the issue. And we're going to talk a lot more about that tomorrow. So before we talk about one of the most trendy conditions that is related intimately to hypochlorhydria, let's talk about some of the more mild symptoms to look out for when hypochlorhydria is present. Perhaps the most common symptoms experienced are the 3 B's: burping, bad breath, and bloating. So all of these symptoms are related to gas being present inside of the body that needs to be expelled somehow. And we've really normalized these symptoms in America. Characters in shows and movies will belch and fart for comedic effect. And these things are presented to us as just normal body functions that, while not the most polite, are things that we all do all the time. But I do want to challenge this a little bit, and I'll preface this by acknowledging that, of course, everybody on the earth has burped and probably experienced some bloating and bad breath. But it is not normal to burp excessively more than a few times after you have finished a meal. It is not normal to have persistent bad breath that merits brushing your teeth more than twice a day. And it is not normal to see a distended stomach so that you can't sit in your pants comfortably after most meals. While microbial presence is normal and necessary in the intestines, the stomach is meant to be a virtually sterile environment. This is ensured by the presence of that acid barrier, right, which works to kill all of the microbes that enter, and that makes the stomach environment inhospitable for any colonization. However, when we have low levels of acid, those microbes actually can and do take up residence in the stomach itself. And those microbes feast on the food that's being consumed, and they produce gaseous end products. Where does that gas go? It bubbles up our esophagus when we burp, and it smells terrible, giving us bad breath no matter how many times we brush. And it also expands into the stomach, causing bloating. So a healthy response to your meal should not involve burping, at least not much, and your tummy should not bulge out over your pants after a meal, and breath shouldn't be outlandishly bad smelling. If this is you, your stomach acid is in need of repair. The other incredibly common symptom that we see for people with low stomach acid is this complaint about a feeling of warmth and increased acidity in the stomach. People will say that it feels inflamed and irritated. And most people will reach for the TUMS when they feel like this, thinking that they need to neutralize their acid. But actually, this almost always means you have too little acid. So basically, your food is not moving through the GI tract fast enough due to low stomach acid. So this is resulting in too much contact with your tissue and eroding your protective digestive mucosa. So we need to first build up your mucosa, but then we need to rebuild your stomach acid to speed up that transit time through the GI tract. So again, I'm going to link to that digestive dysfunction deep dive series that explains this symptom in great detail if you're interested. So now that we've gotten the more mild symptoms out of the way, let's focus on one of those major conditions that gets a lot of attention, especially in the functional world. And that is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. So SIBO has recently been linked to upper gastric health rather than linked to the large intestine as was previously hypothesized. So SIBO is a form of dysbiosis in the small intestine, and it's incredibly common in those with IBS, but it's also been linked to rheumatoid arthritis, to MS, fibromyalgia, Crohn's, Parkinson's, anxiety disorders, among many, many other conditions. And it's unclear whether or not the presence of SIBO is causal or if it's just a result of a slow GI system subject to attacks from an overactive immune system, as has been demonstrated to be so common in people with autoimmunity. But for many, eradicating a SIBO presence can result in significant symptom alleviation. So it's important that we kind of consider it in the landscape of our health approach. So previously, the prevailing theory on the onset of SIBO was that slow transit time in the colon would result in a sort of traffic jam that would back up to the ileocecal valve, which separates the small intestine from the large intestine. So this valve was thought to jam open from the waste buildup, resulting in microbes from the large intestine colonizing the small intestine and causing trouble there. So there's this sort of reflux of microbes into the small intestine. However, recent work has shown that the composition of microbes found in the small intestine for SIBO-positive individuals is much more consistent with the oral microbiome, and it's very different than the large intestines. And so this implies that these microbes were able to survive their trek downward from the mouth, likely due to low stomach acid, right? So if you've been diagnosed with SIBO or suspect that you have it, getting your stomach acid in place is going to be a super important leverage point to focus on. And the mechanism for that is via that acid barrier that we've discussed previously. If that acid barrier were working correctly, then all of that mouth bacteria would be getting neutralized before it reached the small intestine. That's what we want. So, while these are some of the most common ways that compromised stomach acid can present itself, there are many, many ways that this can manifest. And so, I'd like you to just kind of hit pause for a moment to see if any of these symptoms sound familiar. And then another word on food sensitivities. We know that food sensitivities tend to happen when you have a leaky gut and poorly digested food slips through the gut and into the bloodstream. So one of the reasons I prefer people to focus on rebuilding their stomach acid before they embark on a crazy elimination diet is that fixing digestive secretions can actually move the bar on which foods you react to. And it can dramatically reduce the number of foods that you need to eliminate to get meaningful results. So if people suddenly possess the acid necessary to properly break down these larger proteins that were slipping out of the bloodstream, then those proteins can actually get digested and absorbed before they can elicit that immune response. So often we can see big movement on food sensitivities just with proper upper digestive support. One other note about the no taste for meat symptom on the previous page. Usually we'll see this for vegetarians and vegans, but this is likely because the individual does not possess the secretion power to properly digest meat. So as we discussed earlier, protein actually requires an especially acidic stomach to be safe and not immunostimulating if it doesn't get broken down, right? So often people's appetites can really kick into gear once we address the acid levels. If you are struggling to gain weight or you have appetite issues, then this is definitely a relevant consideration for you. All right. So tomorrow, we're really getting into the exciting stuff. We're going to talk more about the tool set I suggest you use to go about fixing your stomach acid. And it is not what you think. I highly, highly doubt you have heard of what I'm going to suggest to you. So I will bring all the goods and talk to you tomorrow. See you then.